Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome to the Northwestern University Engineering Panel. Here today, we're going to talk a little bit about Northwestern's McCormick School of Engineering, and I am joined by some fantastic panelists who are going to help me throughout the evening today. So thank you for choosing to spend your Thursday with us. Please make sure you're asking any questions you have about McCormick and engineering at Northwestern in the chat. But to start, we'll do some introductions so you know who you get to be speaking with today. To begin, I'll start, I guess. My name is Simone. I am a recently graduated student from Northwestern. As an undergraduate student, I studied anthropology, environmental policy, and sustainability. And I will be continuing my education here at Northwestern because I love it so much. And I'll be getting my master's in sustainability in our McCormick School of Engineering. And while I was an undergraduate student, I was involved in a variety of research on campus. But now let's hear a little bit about our panelists. Olivia, do you want to start us off?
Yes, I'd love to. Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia. I am a rising fourth year from Washington, D.C. I am studying biomedical engineering and psychology, as well as being on the pre-med track. And one thing that I do on campus when I'm not a tour guide is I am a peer advisor helping to welcome our first year students during our 1-week orientation called Wildcat Welcome. And with that, I'll pass it off to John.
Thanks, Olivia. Hi, guys. I'm John. I'm also a rising fourth year. I'm from Lake Forest, Illinois, just north of campus. I study chemical engineering with minors in economics and computer science. And when I'm not on these panels or giving tours during the year, I am the associate director of TEDx Northwestern, which is one of the largest student-run TED organizations in the world. Tricia, why don't you go next?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, John. Hi, everyone. My name is Tricia. I'm a rising fourth year student from Hinsdale, Illinois. On campus, I study civil engineering, and I'm also pursuing a certificate in architectural engineering and design. When I'm not in the classroom, though, I am singing a cappella with the Northwestern undertones. I'd love to pass it over to Margot next to introduce herself.
Thanks, Tricia. Hi, everyone. My name is Margot. I, too, am a rising fourth year. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I'm studying industrial engineering with a minor in computer science. And when I'm not in class or giving tours, I'm typically TAing for several of our introductory computer science courses here at Northwestern.
Thank you all so much. I'm so excited with this panelist group. I think we're going to have a really great evening today. So I know that you probably have some very specific questions about Northwestern and about our engineering program, so put those in the chat. But to start us off, I want to talk a little bit about how unique our McCormick School of Engineering is. So a little bit to start, our engineering school talks a lot about whole brain engineering, and that term is thrown around a lot. And sometimes as a student who's applying to Northwestern, you might not know what that is. So John, can you tell us, what does it mean to be a whole brain engineer?
Sure, Simone. Thanks. So whole brain engineering is kind of a broad concept, but largely it means that you're not just being an engineer the whole time here at Northwestern. It gives you kind of the opportunity to kind of educate both the left and right halves of your brain, so your creative and scientific sides. So whether that's completing your theme requirement, which I know Tricia will talk about a little later, or taking classes outside of the traditional STEM curriculum, you really can kind of explore whatever and round out your engineering education with some extra stuff. So all engineers take a public speaking course, trying to make sure you know how to communicate your ideas with people. I was able to take an economics minor, so kind of explore kind of the more arts and sciences portion of the education system. So I'm looking at like doing careers in more the business world outside of college, which the whole brain engineering approach has really allowed me to explore. By and large, it's a great system that lets you kind of explore all sorts of academic interests while still being an engineer.
Thank you, John. But he touched on a great point, is that Northwestern has unique programs for our engineers here. He mentioned the theme briefly, which Tricia will get to talk about very soon. But first, I want to talk a little bit about what it's like when you start your path as an engineer at Northwestern as an incoming student. So Olivia, can you talk to us a little bit about the Engineering First curriculum at Northwestern?
Yes, of course. So the Engineering First curriculum, like Simone was saying, is required for all first-year McCormick students to take. So part of that is the engineering analysis sequence, and that is really a basic set of classes that involves a lot of the fundamentals of engineering that we at McCormick think is really important for all engineers to have, regardless of what major you end up going into or what specialty. So those topics involve like linear algebra, coding, physics. And one of the things that I loved about the engineering analysis sequence is that they really kind of build from the ground up. So for me, I really had no coding experience experience going into college, and it really allowed me to start with those fundamentals and catch up to some of my peers who may have been coding for a while in high school and whatnot. So that's one aspect of the Engineering First curriculum, as well as a class called Design Thinking and a Communication. And I won't talk too much about this because I think we might delve a little bit more into it later, but essentially it's kind of allowing you to get a real world kind of like application of engineering along with like a team and a engineering professor that you work closely with. So that's a little bit of a summary of the Engineering First curriculum.
Thank you, Olivia. So as you can hear, the Engineering First curriculum really sets up students to succeed as an engineer. But another thing that allows our engineering students to be such strong, both students and people, is the theme. And it's a really, really cool opportunity. So Tricia, can you explain what that is a little bit more?
Yeah, I would love to. So as John mentioned earlier, McCormick is a really great whole brain engineering degree that you're going to receive. And a large component of that is your theme requirement. To give an overview of what your whole degree will be like at Northwestern, you're going to take around 48 classes, which sounds like a lot, but we have 12 quarters and that's 4 classes per quarter on average. So 7 of those will be your theme requirement, which is a really good number of those. I've had the ability to take a non-engineering class every quarter, given the theme requirement and the unrestricted elective requirement that you have with your degree. So the theme is a requirement that you take 7 humanities and social sciences, but they don't specify what those have to be within there. All that they specify is that at least 3 of them have to be thematically related. And I put that in quotes because you can really, really stretch what the title of your theme is. So John is on this panel. He made his theme the history of economics, which just gave him reason to combine history classes and economics courses into his theme. I personally came in with a couple of English credits from high school and then took Introduction to Reading and Writing Poetry and Introduction to Reading and Writing Fiction, and then pieced those all together. But then on top of that, I've been able to take Education and Inequality. I've taken Developmental Psychology, Introduction to Drawing. So really you do get to use those classes to delve into everything. And because all engineers have this requirement on top of everyone in all of the undergraduate schools having some sort of distribution requirement, you'll see a bunch of other engineers in those classes. You'll see people from all over the grid. So it's not weird that you're an engineer in a drawing class. I took it with a bunch of other engineers. So this is a really, really great way to dip your toes into other things and really try things that you either miss from doing in high school. Like I loved singing and music in high school. So now I can take courses in that and it actually counts towards my degree. So the theme requirement is a huge part of that full brain engineering and I've loved it. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Tricia did a great job of showing that the interdisciplinary mindset of Northwestern is not limited to people in the humanities, and that STEM students do really get to take advantage of that and explore different areas of interest. So now you've heard a little bit about the basics about our McCormick School of Engineering, but let's talk a little bit more about your questions that you guys might have. So someone wants to know, Margot, this is going to go to you, a little bit about your personal experience with the DTC class as an incoming engineering student, and if there are any other similar opportunities within McCormick or Northwestern that allow students to engage with the local community.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I think DTC is one of those first classes that at least I heard about when I was first considering doing engineering at Northwestern. And it definitely did live up to the expectations for me personally. I kind of knew going in that maybe like my idea of engineering wasn't as much going to be things like building prototypes or doing things in the shop. So I think when I first heard about DTC, I was like, oh, like this might be cool, but probably not something that's gonna like serve me very much after I finish those 2 quarters at DTC. And I'm very pleased to say that that wasn't the case at all. I think the main benefit of DTC is that it really, really teaches you how to think like an engineer, really the second that you step foot onto Northwestern's campus. I think that's such a valuable thing. As Olivia mentioned with the Engineering First curriculum, you are going to be taking a lot of classes that are going to be things like physics and linear algebra and coding. And while that's all really cool and really helpful, I think it's really nice to be able to have that introduction to an actual hands-on project where you kind of own your project and really just give you that sense of ownership from the second that you step foot here on campus. I think my very first project that I did with DTC was that we were working with a woman who was paralyzed in her right hand. but worked in a lab downtown and needed to put gloves on because we have very, very cold winters here. And that was really difficult for her to do with her hands. And so my group of students, there's 4 of us working on this project. We all had a very, very wide range of different kinds of experiences and backgrounds. You'll find that when you come to Northwestern, some kids have been coding since they were 10 years old. Some people literally like have never done anything besides write a Word document on a computer. That was closer to me. But we all really were able to come together and like use our different skills and build a really, really cool 3D printed prototype for this woman. So that was just a really awesome and rewarding opportunity for me personally. I loved it a lot. I got to learn how to use like CAD and 3D modeling softwares, which is something I never thought I would ever learn how to do, but was just something where we were like, oh, well, we want to do this. Can someone show us how? And then we just had a professor like give us a quick run through and we're like, sure, yeah, we can handle this. So yeah, it just ended up being one of those really awesome formative experiences that really made me, as someone who is personally on the edge between the School of Arts and Sciences and the engineering school, really solidified in me that like, this is what I want to do. I really like engineering. I think this is a super cool thing. Even if like, you know, I study industrial engineering now, like I'm not building things in the shop, but that was still a really awesome experience for me. And I think there was a second part of that question, but I forgot it.
I feel like you've done a great job of covering it. And if anyone has any further questions about it, definitely put that in the chat so we can cover it. But thank you, Margot. That sounds like a really, really cool opportunity. And I know hearing about other people's DTC projects there just is equally engaging and intriguing. I know I hear a lot about this penguin one where when I was coming on a tour of Northwestern, penguins at the Shedd Aquarium kept looking up and slipping. So someone in the DTC class designed little booties so that the penguins wouldn't slip on the water or the ice, whatever surface they were on. But now transitioning a little bit more into, you know, engineering generally, we talked a lot about some of the different classes and experiences you'll have. But Olivia, how rigorous is it to be an engineering major? Do students have the time to do things outside of classes, have social activities, or take other classes?
Yeah, I think this is a great question. It's one I feel like we get a lot on our engineering panels. And I would say I definitely have the time to do my extracurriculars and to take other classes. In terms of just like purely classes, I think what Tricia was talking about with the theme requirement has been really amazing for me. I'm doing 2 majors and another pre-professional track. So just like having the ability to fit more classes in my schedule outside of my engineering curriculum has been really amazing. And aside from that, you know, I think all of us as Northwestern students really take advantage of the extracurriculars on campus, as well as just like being able to meet the people on campus. So I like to say that Northwestern definitely has like a work hard, play hard mentality. And I think that, you know, students really prioritize their classes, but also love to make time for their other extracurriculars. And one kind of like quote that we have is, "And is in our DNA." And although that's really cheesy and everything, I definitely think that it's true. Like all Northwestern students are doing so much and really being able to manage their time well so that they can, outside of the classroom, explore other interests, whether that be, you know, another major or an extracurricular, whatever it may be. But definitely think that that is something that has been really amazing in my Northwestern experience, is doing things outside of the classroom.
Thank you. And I don't think all of these people would be here telling you how much they love engineering at Northwestern if they absolutely hated being a student in the school. So, you know, that's a bonus. But Tricia, I have a fun question for you next. How would you describe Northwestern engineering in one word and why?
Yeah, that's a super good question. I think collaborative is the first word that comes to mind for me. We talked about the design thinking and communication class and engineering analysis, which coming in as a first year student, I didn't know anyone else that was studying engineering, and both of those classes immediately gave me a setting to meet them. And so that DTC class, you're immediately working on a team with other students, like Margot was talking about earlier. Like you really do rely on each other to like figure out what it's like to work on a team and actually do a real world project where a lot of you are figuring things out for the first time. So it's really nice to have other people to rely on. And then as far as engineering analysis goes, which is a more individual course, everyone's in the same boat. So everyone's always like, hey, let's put together a study group. Hey, I'm starting a study guide for this. So maybe we can all meet up at the library. Maybe we can all work on our code together, something like that. So collaborative is the first word that comes to mind for me, like when talking about that, especially because those study groups don't go away. Like you carry those on. I've had friends that I've met at the beginning of my Northwestern journey who, even though we go on to more specialized courses, sometimes we overlap again in like our third year. Sometimes we overlap again in our fourth year. Sometimes we choose to take like a theme class together. So that was one of the things that I was most surprised about, and also pleasantly surprised, because I always pictured engineering students kind of having their nose in textbooks, but to see how social and collaborative and helpful everyone has been so awesome.
Thank you. I think that was a fantastic word to choose. I want to switch lanes a little bit and talk about the resources available to our engineering students at Northwestern. So first, John, what is the process to applying to work in a research lab or just getting involved with research as an undergrad?
That's a great question, Simone. It's actually really, really easy. I was fortunate enough to where my DTC professor freshman year is named Peter Savetta, and he's the director of undergraduate research at Northwestern. I love this man. He's amazing. He tells me all the time, we've stayed in touch, that they have so much money. They have $3 billion annually to give to undergrad research, and they want students to take it. Like, it's there for you. And they have more openings for positions than they have undergraduate students, and all that money is just for undergrads. So it's really, really easy to get involved in research. One of my first chemical engineering specific classes, thermodynamics, was taught by a brand new professor at Northwestern. And he was starting up a lab, and me and two other friends of mine at the end of the class basically said, "Hey, are you doing research? Can we be involved? Like, we like him as a teacher." And he said, "Yes." So for the last 2 years, I've been in his lab doing research, applying some of the stuff I learned in DTC, like 3D printing prototypes of machinery to conduct tests, using computer science like to do data analysis and try to find insights into what the experiments are about. So that was just us like going up to him after class and saying, "Hey, can we talk about doing research?" And he said, "Yeah, of course." And we met with him in his office, and it was that easy. So research is definitely super involved and super easy to be a part of. It's also not just limited to STEM. I know this is a STEM call, but there's research opportunities across the board. They have the undergraduate research office has a circumnavigator grant. It's a grant given to like one student every year. You get $10,000 to travel across the world. You have to go to 5 different countries on 3 different continents, I think, in the course of your research. That stuff is there for you to do. I know one student did it in like how puppetry is important to cultures across the world. So research is not at all pigeonholed into STEM, lab coat and gloves type of stuff, even though that's what you're interested in. It's there and easy to apply for.
Thanks, John. That's great to hear. And I definitely think that my experience with research was very similar in terms of ease. Another resource that people are very curious about is the both internship and job search. So Margot, how does the School of Engineering prepare students for jobs or internships?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is definitely a question that I feel like is on a lot of students' minds, especially as internships get more and more common throughout your time in college. And this is definitely something that I experienced. After my freshman year, I was like, oh, I'm just going to go home and hang out, like have a good time. And then after sophomore and junior year, I was starting to think more like, okay, what kinds of things do I want to do after college? And what internships can kind of give me some experience to help me decide that. Because it can be kind of hard just taking classes being like, oh yeah, I now know what job I want. So yeah, when I sort of began with that whole search and started thinking like, okay, like I'm a student, I don't have a lot of experience, but these are the things that I'm interested in. The first point of contact that I had was with my academic advisor. And so advising at Northwestern is a really, really awesome thing. You're given an advisor the second that you step foot on campus. And then with every major or minor, everything else that you declare, you'll get additional advisors that are focused on that. So my general academic advisor for industrial engineering was really, really helpful, would really direct me to different places and to maybe companies, smaller companies in the Chicago area that he had heard of, and places that he thought might be interesting for me to apply to. This is a really great point of contact, especially since your academic advisor already will know you on a fairly personal level, just from the fact that you have to meet with them before declaring classes and things like that. After that, though, I went to go chat with the people over at ECD, which I believe stands for Engineering Career Development. Could be wrong, but it's something along those lines. And ECD is basically the McCormick school version of NCA, which is just our general career development center on campus. And the nice thing there is that all of the career fairs and everything is directed towards positions that are going to be in a more engineering field. So it's really nice to have the general full school NCA career fairs and resources and things like that. But if you are looking for positions that are in more niche engineering fields, really awesome to have that as well. So as I said, they do host career fairs. They'll also look over your resume, hold mock interviews. A lot of the time, technical interviews are something that are super unheard of to people, definitely was to me. And they'll be able to do mock interviews to help prepare you for things like that as well. So yeah, those were really the main two ones that I used in my job search. We also have Handshake, which is an online platform that's really similar to like LinkedIn or Indeed, and we'll just list jobs and you can customize your profile so that you're only looking at positions that are interesting to you. So yeah, those are the three resources that I use most often, but really everyone like at Northwestern and all of the advisors and people that are looking out for you are more than happy to help direct you towards places or positions that would be interesting to you.
Thank you so much, Margot. Margot mentioned a ton of really, really great resources at Northwestern, both for engineers and non-engineers. So you can definitely check any of those out by just looking them up. We have really fantastic websites for each of those different resources. Another really common question that I want Olivia to take a turn answering is about the mental health resources for Northwestern students and how accessible they are for students on campus.
Yeah, this is an awesome question because I think that, you know, we're talking a little bit about how rigorous academics are at Northwestern, and definitely that can take a toll on your mental health sometimes. I think overall, there are a ton of resources that are available. For example, CAPS, which is counseling and psychological services, and as well as they're a kind of confidential resource that you can go to talk about those topics if you want to, as well as I think in general, I feel like the atmosphere at Northwestern is super supportive in terms of that. I've had definitely some weeks that have been a little bit harder for me in terms of personal things going on. And I have a couple times gone to professors and just asked, you know, I have a lot on my plate right now. Is there any way that I could take this midterm in like 2 days instead of tomorrow or next week? And I've always found that professors are incredibly accommodating towards that. And as well as I think my peers are really understanding, they're definitely always willing to help. Tricia talked about how collaborative the environment is, and I definitely agree with that, especially in terms of helping to support each other when, you know, times are tough. And I think that's something that's really important and very, a conversation that's very valued at Northwestern. So a lot of resources on campus for that.
Thank you so much, Olivia. Yeah, our CAPS department is a great resource. They also have a very comprehensive website if you want to just take a look and see what kind of services they do offer. A little bit of another common question we get, and I'm going to have Tricia answer this one. Can engineering majors study abroad, and how can you fit that into the engineering curriculum?
Yeah, totally. So, of course, engineers can totally study abroad. That's a common question that I get on my tours also, just because a lot of times people are like, hey, there's a lot of courses, like sequence courses that engineers take, or it's just a lot of classes that you have to get done. But 33% of Northwestern students study abroad, so it is a third of students. The most common time to do so is the fall quarter of your third year. That's just because that aligns super well with like a semester abroad. So you would just leave a little bit earlier and then come back in time to spend your winter and spring here. Study abroad in general is really, really accessible. We have wonderful study abroad advisors. All you have to do is whether you know exactly where you want to go or you just need a little bit of help applying, all the way to I have no clue where I want to go. It's just set up with an appointment with one of them, and they're super helpful in helping you do that. One thing I will mention also is that your financial aid at the university transfers over when you study abroad. So that's a really good thing to bring up. But overall, study abroad is super accessible. There are programs that are specifically tailored for engineering, whether that's spending a summer abroad, whether that's a Northwestern quarter-long program or an affiliated semester-long one. Additionally, because of that theme requirement, I've also known a lot of engineers to knock out English credits in Europe or like something along those lines. So that's another way that using that engineering first whole brain sort of thing can be helpful in knocking those credits out. So yeah, definitely totally possible. A ton of people do it. And even though there are engineering programs, you can also knock out some of those related ones as well if you are looking to go somewhere and maybe they don't have engineering things. So definitely a lot of options if you're looking to do so.
That's awesome to hear. And I know a few of these panelists have studied abroad or are planning on it. So it's definitely possible as an engineering student at Northwestern. The final resource I want to touch on is academic advisors. So John, can you tell us a little bit about how involved academic advisors are for engineering students or students at Northwestern in general?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So every incoming first-year student is given a first-year academic advisor. Mine was Ken Gentry, who's one of the DTC professors, really nice guy, kind of looks like Matt Damon. These advisors are all super nice, super helpful, kind of help you get your feet under you, figure out what you want to do until you declare your major. And as soon as you declare a major, you're given an additional major advisor. So I have a major advisor in the chemical engineering department. You're also given additional advising for each extra major minor certificate you declare while you're at Northwestern. So there's a computer science undergrad minor advisor who I and Margot, I'm sure, both work with. There's also undergraduate advising in the economics department that I get from an economics minor. So all of that is structured advising, which is all super helpful. They all like approve study plans for you to make sure you're going to graduate on time, help you figure out what kind of stuff you want to do. If you want to do an internship, I know Margot said her advisor was helpful with that. There's also informal advising at Northwestern, which can be a professor that you like. Mine's my DTC professor, Professor Sabetta. I talk with him all the time about like life decisions or bouncing ideas off of them. So there's that formal advising network that's super helpful and kind of helps guide you along your experience at Northwestern. But if for some reason you don't get along with your advisor, there's other options there. There's students who are older than you who you're friends with. There's professors you have who you like and stay in touch with. Maybe it's your research director if you do research, or a club advisor, something like that. There's a lot of people at Northwestern, to Tricia's point earlier, who are super collaborative and want to work with you to help you do better. So whenever you need help, whenever you have questions to ask, there will always be people there for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. I'm so glad to hear that. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about some specific programs and some specific questions. So Olivia, how do the biomedical engineering classes overlap with the pre-med track at Northwestern?
Yeah, definitely. So this was kind of one of the reasons why I picked biomedical engineering, is because of the engineering majors, it probably overlaps the most with the pre-med requirements. However, I have definitely seen people who are not biomedical engineers be pre-med. So one of my friends is material science and engineering, and he's also pre-med. So it's definitely possible. But like I said before, there are the classes that overlap. For example, BMEs are all required to take one quarter of organic chemistry, but because I was pre-med, I had the wonderful privilege of taking the entire year of organic chemistry, as well as some other classes such as bio classes, physics, so those overlap as well. In general, though, I think kind of the beauty of the quarter system is that we're allowed to take more classes, and the flexibility in that schedule is really what helped me to integrate both into my classes that I am taking throughout my Northwestern career. But definitely, like, I think that is what is amazing about Northwestern, and I don't really think that I could do engineering and be pre-med at any other school, just because of the sheer amount of classes that are required for both.
Thank you, Olivia. I know that is a very common question, and I do know a lot of biomedical engineering students who are pre-med, but there are also a variety that are not on the pre-med track specifically. Tricia, I have another interesting question for you. Would you describe the engineering classes as more theoretical or hands-on, or how would you categorize most of the engineering classes?
That's a super good question. So speaking from my own experience with that, I am in a very physical type of engineering. So very like physics-based, very like not on the computer. So I've had a really good balance with that. I've had a lot of theoretical classes where we just look at buildings and architecture in the city, and we do presentations on them and analyze like existing structures, and then learn the theory behind them, because that's obviously very important when you're designing a building or a bridge, anything like that. But I've also had on the opposite side where we've had studio classes where you're in a quarter-long project and working with other students. Maybe you're doing a design of a bridge, maybe you're making a little mock-up of it. So obviously classes like DTC, design thinking communication, are very hands-on. So it definitely depends on your major as well. So a lot of my friends that are in more computer-based engineering classes are obviously spending a lot more time on the computer and not doing as much of the theoretical side of things. But for me, it's a really, really good balance. I've had the ability to actually go physically into Chicago and like when I say theoretical, it still has hands-on components because we're still going into Chicago. We're still physically looking at these buildings. So it's a really good balance. And again, the theoretical is necessary to be able to do all the hands-on stuff. But I've really enjoyed the balance of both of those because the intersection of them is super important. And actually being able to visualize things is super important for me, as you could probably guess by the major I chose. So that is just a little bit about that.
Thank you so much. Another specific question about the engineering program at Northwestern, Margot, is what is the gender distribution within engineering? Does that change as you get into some of the higher level, smaller classes? And what is it like being a woman in the engineering program?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think this is something that a lot of students worry about or think, like, oh, engineering is a heavily, heavily male dominated field. Like, is my voice going to be heard? Like, am I going to feel awkward in class discussions speaking up? I know that was definitely something I worried about. I went to an all girls high school, so that was never really a problem for me in high school. But yeah, definitely moving into that can be a question. I think statistically, I believe it's 30% women in McCormick. Is that correct? 35, 30, 35. I think somewhere in that general range. I know that the national average is about 14, so we're right around double that at McCormick, which is really, really awesome. I will say though, like, just hearing statistics, at least for me, doesn't really do anything. It's like, hey, I don't know if that's a lot or a little. So just from like my personal experience, I've honestly never once felt like I was a minority in the class being a woman there. It never felt like my opinions or voice was being overshadowed by any means. A lot of these classes, as Tricia was mentioning, are highly collaborative, highly hands-on. You're always working in smaller groups, and like everyone does have a very equal chance, an opportunity to have a say in how these projects go. So yeah, I think just like from my own anecdotal experience, like I've spent, almost made my way fully through McCormick here at Northwestern, which is, bittersweet, of course. But genuinely, I've not had a single class where I was feeling a little bit overshadowed in that sense. There's also several female professors, which I think is something that I thought was really cool. Not really something that I expected, but I've had many female professors in both engineering and in computer science. So that's also been really exciting and definitely goes to show that McCormick as a whole really cares about like making that gender distribution a lot more equal. It's obviously naturally a less female dominated field, which does really suck, but we're making a lot of efforts to really level that balance a little bit. And just generally speaking, I've not had a problem with it whatsoever.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know there are also a variety of different clubs for women in STEM. Specifically, there's SWE, Society of Women Engineers, and different organizations for women in the McCormick School of Engineering to kind of come together and have a space to talk about these kind of questions. John, switch gears a little bit. Can you tell us opportunities available for students interested in entrepreneurship at Northwestern, specifically engineering?
Yeah, of course. There's this really great office at Northwestern called the Garage, which is like the Center for Entrepreneurship, and is really, really incredible. It's this old parking garage that has been completely renovated into a bunch of like office spaces and collaboration spaces. Really, really neat. So entrepreneurship is definitely a big part at Northwestern. There actually are a couple DTC projects that have in the past been continued by basically the students who were involved in them and fleshed out into businesses or patents or that sort of thing. So entrepreneurship is definitely a big part of the curriculum here. The Garage works in a couple of ways. The first way is there are students who can get like residencies at the Garage. So you basically apply and you get guaranteed desk space there. You work there for a couple of quarters. They have a lot of advisors. So I think like the founder of PayPal or something like that works for them, or I think it's Grubhub. Founder of Grubhub works there. So they have all these like basically, I think they're called entrepreneurs in residence who work in the Garage and advise these groups. Also, if you want to be involved in entrepreneurship but don't have like a company idea or business idea, you can get match made to one of the organizations that's already there. So they can find you an entrepreneurship project that's like up and coming and they need help with maybe the coding or the business development or something, and they can get you in the project. It's also not limited to STEM. I know the Garage has opportunities in like art and music as well. So that's kind of the center for entrepreneurship on campus. It also does exist in those like design classes though, like DTC. There's a couple, at least in chemical engineering, there's a couple like lab-based design classes as you get up towards your senior year. And those classes often, if you come up with something really interesting, there's ways for you to kind of continue with that, if it's in research or if it's in business or something of the sort. I think that about covers it. If anyone has anything else to add there, I'm not too familiar with the actual garage itself. I don't really do much there.
And the garage also, we do have a video on our YouTube page that's a little bit of a Q&A about opportunities at the garage. It's even filmed there. So you can look on this YouTube channel that you're watching this for more information about the garage. So next, Margot, could you talk a little bit about the relationship that Northwestern students have across colleges? Is there a disconnect, or does Northwestern have a sense of community on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So just right off the bat, Northwestern absolutely has a great and wonderful sense of community. It's a big part of the reason why I even chose the school in the first place. I kind of like mentioned in the beginning that I was a little bit on the fence when I first came to Northwestern about whether or not engineering was for me. It was like, okay, math and science were fun in high school, but like, who knows if that means I'll actually like engineering. So yeah, I think when I was looking for a school in general, I was really looking for somewhere where there wasn't a huge disconnect between, engineering, arts and sciences, being in anything like that. Like, I didn't want it to be super segregated and have it be like, okay, if you're an engineer at Northwestern, you're an engineer and that's it. And that's absolutely not the case at Northwestern whatsoever. The walls between the schools, I'd say, are very, very low. You're more than welcome to take classes in any of the schools. Just because your, home school is McCormick because you're majoring in engineering does not by any means exclude you from taking classes in the College of Arts and Sciences, for example. So like my freshman year, for example, just like how this kind of helped me throughout my time at Northwestern, my freshman year had no idea what I wanted to do. So I took a couple of those engineering first classes. And then I also took things like intro to soc, intro to econ, a bunch of classes in other fields that I thought might be interesting. And in all of those classes, like I noticed that there were a ton of other students just like me who were maybe thinking of majoring in other things, but wanted to kind of dip their toes in other areas and try things. So yeah, generally speaking, I'd say like when you come to Northwestern, like you're coming to Northwestern as a whole, you're not coming to Northwestern, siloed into whichever major you choose. That's something I really love. Makes it really, really easy to switch around. If, for example, I took DTC and some of those intro to engineering courses and thought like, oh, this isn't for me, it would have been so easy for me to switch. That's what my twin sister did. Like we both started out in engineering, took the same classes. She was like, I don't like this at all. This sucks. Like I love econ. I'm going to go do econ and psych. And I think she like turned in a slip and then like 24 hours later was within the College of Arts and Sciences. Now loves it and is having a great time. So yeah, that was a really rambly way of saying like generally just a really great sense of community at Northwestern, and you're by no means kind of compartmentalized into whichever major you may choose.
I love to hear that. I've done a few of these different panels, and I have noticed that students at Northwestern and tend to say the same thing. And I had that experience as well, that you're able to interact not only with the academics across these 6 schools, but also the people. Olivia, I have another fun question for you. What is something that you wish you would have known before becoming an engineering major? And is there anything that you would wish you could say to your past self before you started?
Wow, this is a very deep question. So for me, a little bit of background, I came into Northwestern not really knowing if I wanted to do engineering or if I wanted to be pre-med. And the whole time kind of like applying to colleges, my college counselor back in high school was like, you're going to end up having to choose between the two. Like, do you want to do this or that? And I was so nervous coming into Northwestern because I was like, oh my gosh, do I have like, how much time do I have to decide? And was just really like kind of taking classes that would sort of what I thought would help me to decide. And it wasn't until after my first quarter and I went into my academic advising meeting and was like, I have no idea what to do. And my advisor was like, just wait it out, just like wait and see what you like, and you don't have to decide now, you can do both. And I was like so surprised that I could do both in the first place, and that someone was telling me to actually take my time. So I think for me, I'm definitely in like a unique situation because I feel like some engineers came in, ready to be engineers since they were born. But I think for me, just telling myself in the past to not rush it and just honestly take classes that I enjoyed, and being able to see, what aspects of DTC that I really liked versus my bio classes that I really liked, and learning from those rather than kind of like putting a lot of pressure on myself to make the right decision that I thought at the time I needed to make.
Thank you so much, Olivia. I think that was a really fantastic answer. We have time for one last question before we go to our final Why Northwestern and McCormick. So John, someone in the chat said that they had talked to a former student, and that former student mentioned that a lot of engineering classes involve consulting with real-world businesses. Can you explain this a little bit more in depth?
Yeah, sure. I can definitely try to. I don't have too much experience with that personally. Chemical engineering tends to be more of a theoretical engineering field with like labs where you explore like how water goes through pipes instead of like working with businesses. But at least with respect to the classes that I have taken, like DTC, I worked with a shed aquarium on my first DTC project, which was super exciting. And I know that there are a couple classes where you'll be contracted out basically to work for a business or a local community group or something like that to either design a project or something of the sort. One other thing there is some professors will bring in like visiting professors or visiting speakers. So one of the classes that I took was cell biology for chemical engineers. It's a class that you can take instead of the bio version. And the professor brought in a bunch of industry people who worked in biology. So whether that was drug development or how chemical engineering applies to like pharmaceuticals and or oil spill cleanups or stuff like that. Basically, they were able to tie in the why of what you're learning, basically explaining like, this is where the application of the one thing you learned a couple of years ago or a couple quarters ago is in the real world, which was definitely neat for me. The visiting professorships are always really, really awesome, and bringing in guest speakers has always been really productive for me.
Thank you, John. And you can learn more about all of the classes Northwestern has to offer on our McCormick website. They have a pretty good detailed list of all the classes that engineering students are able to take and what those kind of include. But our DTC classes definitely involve kind of working with different businesses in the area, and a lot of different Northwestern classes offer you engagement with communities around the area. So to finish up, we are going to do a quick round robin of why McCormick, why Northwestern. So Olivia, do you want to start us off?
Yes, I'd love to. So for me, my why McCormick kind of has to do with, I'm a very hands-on learner, and I feel like McCormick, the education that I've gotten in this school has been so personalized. For example, I was really worried. We took our entire spring quarter last year online due to the pandemic. And I was really nervous because I'm definitely someone who enjoys like being in the classroom, being in front of my professor and like with my classmates, especially doing like hands-on projects. And I was worried that I just wouldn't get the same education being at home, kind of like sitting at my desk alone. But within the first week, my professor shipped us like a breadboard with all these like resistors and capacitors. And throughout the entire quarter, we made a blood pressure monitor and an EKG, like all of us at home with our little like individual breadboards. And our professor pretty much had office hours for like the entire day on Thursdays and Fridays. And that kind of like individualized care that the professors really give to their students is what I've loved about McCormick, especially in this time that is like so strange and kind of isolating. I love that they were taking the time to actually, still have those components of the real classroom and bring those to us wherever we were. So I guess I'll popcorn it to Tricia.
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. So for me, I knew I wanted to study engineering since high school, and I knew like the exact type that I wanted to study too, which is rare, but I knew it. And choosing a school though, I also had a bunch of parts of my identity that I also wanted to pursue in college. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, I sing a cappella, and a cappella and engineering are very, very different things, music in general. Also, I wanted to be heavily involved with student theater and be involved, like not just extracurricularly, but also take classes in a bunch of different things. So this whole brain engineering idea that we've kind of been hammering in is truly so the reason that I picked Northwestern. Because with the combination of the theme and unrestricted electives, I can take non-engineering classes and really have that balance that I so appreciate and so need as a person. So I really love being at a school that accepts and promotes that like intersection of all these sorts of different things that seem radically different, but once you're here, like seems so normal because so many people do it. Additionally, on the subject of architecture and civil engineering, Chicago was the city that made me fall in love with my major. And so going to a school that is so heavily involved with the city that kind of sparked my interest in it has been really special to me. So that's just a little bit of icing on the cake. And with that, I'd love to pass it over to John.
Thanks, Tricia. Yeah, my why Northwestern, why McCormick is kind of similar to theirs. It's all about the combinations for me. So I'm from a suburb that's pretty close to school. It's like a 45-minute drive, which is a little close for some people. For me, it's just about perfect because it gives me the flexibility to see my family if I want to or ignore them if I don't. And that kind of extends, that kind of ability to do what I want is kind of why Northwestern specifically lit my interest. I can study chemical engineering, which I wasn't sure about. I didn't know if I wanted to do it. It could be a little intimidating at times. At the same time, I can study economics and study abroad in the summer or get an internship in a totally unrelated field that's not engineering at all. Also, for me, a big thing was it's a Big Ten school. We have amazing sports that are free for all students your entire career. You get tons of free shirts like this one. And you're in the Chicagoland area. You're also in a suburb. Right along the lake, we have 2 beaches. We're a beach school. People sometimes forget that. It's a wonderful place to be, especially during the warmer months, maybe not during the winter. But basically, long and short of it for me is Northwestern combined all these things that I was really interested in a great format. The quarter system allows the flexibility to pursue all of that. It's just a great community. And on top of that, since I've been there, I've met all the people, and it's kind of made me want to stay forever a Wildcat. Margot?
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, so my reason that I wanted to go to McCormick in specifically and study engineering was that while I knew that engineering was something that I might want to pursue, I thought okay, even if I do end up loving engineering and want to stay in an engineering program, I know that by the time I graduate, I don't want to have graduated having only taken engineering courses. So as I've said before, and as really all of the panelists have mentioned, Northwestern just does have such a interesting and well-developed engineering curriculum in the sense that you're going to have experience and exposure to so many different things by the time you graduate. So that's why I chose McCormick. The reason that I wanted to do engineering at Northwestern is honestly just because of the people. I know it's a super cliche and trite answer, but I knew if I went here, there would be smart people. That wasn't something I was worried about. But I was really pleasantly surprised and excited to learn after I visited that the people here are also just incredibly kind and really down to earth. And I think that's a combination that I wasn't really expecting, but is one that I've absolutely continued to find throughout my almost 4 years here. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you to all my wonderful panelists. And thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel for more information about Northwestern. We have a ton of different information sessions and student panels filmed thus far. So if you have any more questions, hopefully they've been answered in another video. You can also find Northwestern admissions on Instagram, Facebook, and Snapchat. But otherwise, have a great Thursday evening and go Cats!